The transport ship Vindication shuddered as it broke through Earth's atmosphere, its hull screaming against the primitive planet's dense air. Inside the cramped detention cell, Zarakai pressed her scaled hands against the reinforced viewing port, watching the blue and green world grow larger beneath them. Her golden eyes reflected a mixture of defiance and barely concealed fear. Prisoner 847 Zeta, prepare for immediate deployment, the automated voice announced through the ship's communication system. The words echoed coldly in the metallic chamber, each syllable a reminder of her fall from grace. Zarakai had once been a decorated captain in the Vorthic Imperial Navy, commanding respect across 3 star systems. Her tactical genius had saved countless lives during the Krillin Wars, and her name was spoken with reverence in the military academies of her homeworld. But one moment of conscience, one refusal to follow orders that would have resulted in the massacre of an entire civilian population, had stripped her of everything. The High Command had called it treason. She called it honor. The transport's engines waned as they descended toward a designated drop zone somewhere in what the ship's navigation system identified as North America. Zarakai had studied Earth during her journey here, learning about the primitive species that inhabited this backwater planet. Humans, they called themselves. A young race barely past their industrial age, still confined to their single world, still fighting among themselves over resources and territory. It was the perfect prison for someone like her, a place where her advanced knowledge and technology would be useless, where she could live out her days in obscurity among beings too primitive to understand what she truly was. The cell door hissed open, and 2 Vorthek guards stepped inside. Their armor gleamed under the harsh lighting, and their expressions remained hidden behind their ceremonial masks. Zarakai recognized neither of them, but she could sense their discomfort. Even disgraced, her reputation preceded her? Time to go, the first guard said, his voice distorted by the mask's voice modulator. The High Command has granted you one final mercy. You'll be given basic survival gear and a neural translator. After that, you're on your own. Zarakai stood slowly, her 7-foot frame casting a long shadow across the cell. Her natural armor-like skin bore the scars of countless battles, each mark a testament to her service to an empire that had ultimately betrayed her. She said nothing as they escorted her to the deployment chamber. The survival gear was minimal, a weather-resistant jumpsuit that would adapt to local conditions, a small pack containing basic tools, and the neural translator that would allow her to understand and speak the dominant human languages. They had also provided her with identity documents, crudely forged but sufficient to pass human inspection. According to the papers, she was now Sarah Chun, a refugee from an unnamed conflict zone. Any last words for the High Command? The second guard asked as they reached the deployment pod. Zarakai turned to face him, her golden eyes blazing with controlled fury. Tell them that history will remember who chose honor over convenience. And tell them that the humans they consider so primitive might surprise them one day. The guard's helmet tilted slightly, perhaps in confusion or amusement. You're being banished to a world where the inhabitants still use chemical propulsion and wage wars with metal projectiles. I doubt they'll surprise anyone. The pod door sealed shut, and Zarakai felt the familiar sensation of rapid descent. Through the small porthole she watched the surface of Earth rush up to meet her. Forests, mountains, and rivers spread out below like an alien tapestry. It was beautiful in its own primitive way. She had to admit, the pod's emergency parachutes deployed with a violent jerk, and moments later, Zarakai felt solid ground beneath her feet for the first time in months. The pod had landed in a dense forest clearing, surrounded by towering trees that reached toward a brilliant blue sky. The air was thick with unfamiliar scents, earth, vegetation, and something else she couldn't identify. She emerged from the pod. Slowly, her enhanced senses taking in every detail of her new environment. The gravity was slightly heavier than she was used to, and the atmospheric composition different enough to make her feel lightheaded. But she was alive, and she was free, even if that freedom came with the ultimate price, the neural translator. Activated automatically as she detected approaching sounds. Footsteps, heavy and deliberate, moving through the underbrush, Zarakai tensed, her hand instinctively reaching for weapons that were no longer there. The Vorthak had stripped her of everything except the clothes on her back. 3 figures emerged from the tree line, and Zarakai got her first close look at actual humans. They were smaller than she had expected, their skin pale and soft-looking compared to her own natural armor. But their eyes were sharp and intelligent, and they carried weapons with the confidence of experienced users. The leader was a man with graying hair and weathered features, dressed in military-style clothing that had seen better days. Behind him, a younger woman with dark hair kept her rifle trained on Zarakai, while a third figure, barely more than a boy, hung back with wide eyes. "Well, well," the older man said, his voice carrying the authority of someone used to command. "What do we have here? You're not from around here, are you, miss?" The neural translator worked perfectly, converting his words into concepts Zarakai could understand while simultaneously preparing responses in the local dialect. She decided that honesty, to a point, might serve her best. "My name is Sarah," she said, her voice carrying a slight accent that the translator had programmed to explain her foreign origins. "I'm a refugee. My transport crashed, and I'm the only survivor." The man's eyes narrowed as he took in her unusual appearance. Even with the jumpsuit covering most of her scaled skin, her height and the golden color of her eyes marked her as different. But to her surprise, he didn't seem shocked or afraid. Instead, he appeared thoughtful. "Jim Morrison," he said, extending a hand in what she recognized from her studies as a human greeting gesture. "Former Marine, current pain in the government's backside. These are my friends, Sarah and Tommy. We saw your crash come down, hell of a light show." Zarakai hesitated for a moment before taking his hand. His grip was firm and warm, and she was struck by the complete absence of fear in his demeanor. "You're not surprised by my appearance?" Jim chuckled, releasing her hand. "Lady, after 20 years in the Corps and another 10 trying to expose what our government knows about visitors from other worlds, very little surprises me anymore. The question is, are you here to help or harm?" "I'm here because I had no choice," Zarakai replied honestly. "I was exiled from my home for refusing to follow orders that would have resulted in innocent deaths. This world was chosen as my prison." Sarah, the woman with the rifle, spoke up for the first time. "So you're some kind of space refugee? And they just dumped you here?" "Something like that," Zarakai confirmed. "I have nowhere else to go and no way to return home. I suppose I'll need to learn how to survive among your people." Tommy, the young man, finally found his voice. "This is incredible, a real alien refugee. Do you know about the ships that people have been seeing, the lights in the sky? Are there others like you?" Jim held up a hand, silencing the boy's excited questions. "Easy there, Tommy. She just crash-landed. Let's focus on the immediate situation." He turned back to Zarakai. "Sarah, if that's really your name, you're in what humans call a difficult situation. The government agencies that monitor this kind of thing will be here soon, and they don't have a reputation for treating visitors kindly. You need to disappear and fast." Zarakai felt a flutter of something she hadn't experienced in months: hope. These humans were offering to help her, despite knowing nothing about her except that she was different. It was more kindness than her own people had shown her. "Why would you help me?" she asked, genuinely curious. Jim's expression grew serious. "Because I've spent the last decade fighting against people who think different means dangerous. Because everyone deserves a chance to prove who they really are. And because something tells me that you're going to need friends in this world." Sarah lowered her rifle completely. "Besides, if even half the stories about government black sites are true, turning you over to them would be a death sentence. We don't do that to refugees, no matter where they're from." The sound of distant helicopters reached their ears, growing steadily louder. Jim cursed under his breath. "That was faster than I expected. We need to move, now." Without waiting for Zarakai's response, he started toward a barely visible trail that led deeper into the forest. Sarah and Tommy fell into formation behind him, and after a moment's hesitation, Zarakai followed. She had committed herself to trusting these humans, at least for now, as they moved through the dense woodland. Jim explained their situation in quick, efficient sentences. He led a small group of former military personnel and civilian researchers who investigated unexplained phenomena and, when possible, protected those who fell victim to government cover-ups. They operated from an abandoned mining facility in the mountains, staying off the grid and moving frequently to avoid detection. "It's not much of a life," Jim admitted as they reached a concealed vehicle hidden under camouflage netting, "but it beats being disappeared into some black-budget program." 6 months had passed since Zarakai's arrival at Camp Liberty, and the abandoned mining facility had become more than just a hideout. Under her guidance, the small group of human rebels had transformed their sanctuary into something approaching a proper resistance base. Her knowledge of advanced technology, carefully adapted to work with human capabilities, had revolutionized their operations. Dr. Elena Vasquez stood in what they now called the research lab, studying readings from a device that shouldn't have existed on Earth for another century. The scanner Zarakai had helped her build could detect energy signatures from miles away, giving them early warning of government operations in their area. "Movement on the eastern approach," Elena called out, her voice carrying through the facility's improved communication system. 3 vehicles, military configuration. Zarakai looked up from the tactical display she had been updating. Her scaled fingers moved across the interface with practiced precision, pulling up topographical data and cross-referencing it with known government patrol patterns. "They're not headed directly for us," she announced, "but they're investigating the area where my pod landed." Jim Morrison entered the command center, his weathered face grim with concern. "How long before they trace it back to us?" "They won't," Zarakai said confidently. "I've had Tommy and Sarah deploy the debris trail we prepared. It leads to the river, suggesting the survivor drowned attempting to escape. The evidence will confirm what they want to believe, that I died on impact." Marcus approached the group, carrying an encrypted communication device. "We've got another problem. Our contacts in the underground network are reporting increased government activity across multiple states. They're not just looking for Sarah anymore. They're actively hunting for any sign of extraterrestrial contact." Zarakai's expression darkened. This was exactly what she had feared might happen. Her arrival, despite their careful cover-up, had somehow triggered a wider investigation. "They must have detected something during my transport's atmospheric entry. Energy signatures, perhaps, or unusual material composition from the debris. What does this mean for the others?" Sarah asked, entering the command center with Tommy close behind. Over the past months, word had spread through certain networks about a group that helped protect people from government overreach. Camp Liberty had become a sanctuary for more than just Zaraka. The facility now housed 17 people, including a former NASA scientist who had been silenced for reporting unusual readings from deep space telescopes, a military contractor who had refused to develop weapons based on recovered alien technology, and several civilians who had witnessed things the government preferred to keep secret. "It means we need to accelerate our timeline," Jim said grimly. "We've been preparing for the day when we'd have to go active instead of passive. That day might be coming sooner than we thought." Zarakai had been working with the group to develop what they called the Revelation Protocol, a plan to release evidence of extraterrestrial contact to the global population in a way that couldn't be suppressed or discredited. But the plan required careful preparation and the right moment to ensure maximum impact. "The global communication network isn't ready," Dr. Vasquez protested. "We need at least another 3 months to properly infiltrate the major news organizations and social media platforms." "We may not have 3 months," Tommy said, pointing to the tactical display. "Sarah, show them what you found in the government communication intercepts." Zarakai pulled up a series of decoded messages she had intercepted using technology that made human encryption look like children's puzzles. "They're planning something called Operation Clean Slate, based on the communication patterns and resource allocation. It appears to be a comprehensive sweep designed to eliminate all evidence of extraterrestrial contact." The room fell silent as the implications sank in. Clean Slate wasn't just a search operation. It was a purge. Anyone who had encountered alien technology, witnessed unexplained phenomena, or possessed knowledge that contradicted the official narrative would be targeted. How long do we have? Jim asked quietly. The operation is scheduled to begin in 2 weeks, Zarakai replied. They're using my arrival as justification for a complete security review. My exile has given them the excuse they needed to clean house. Marcus slammed his fist on the table. Damn it! We've been trying to protect people by keeping them hidden, but we've just made them easier targets. No, Zarakai said firmly. You've given them something more valuable than protection? You've given them family. And now it's time to show the world what that family can accomplish. Sarah leaned forward, her eyes intense. You have a plan. Zarakai smiled, and for the first time since her arrival, it was a predator smile. I have something better than a plan. I have a declaration of war. She activated the main display, showing a detailed schematic that made the humans gasp. This is a Vortha communication relay. It's designed to broadcast across interstellar distances using quantum entanglement principles. But with some modifications, it can also tap into every communication satellite, broadcast station, and network node on Earth simultaneously. Dr. Vasquez studied the schematic with growing excitement. You want to hijack the entire global communication infrastructure at once? Not hijack, Zarakai corrected. Liberate. Every classified document about extraterrestrial contact, every piece of recovered technology, every witness testimony that's been suppressed, all of it released simultaneously to every connected device on the planet. Tommy's eyes went wide. That would be the biggest information dump in human history. And it can't be stopped once it starts, Zarakai continued. The broadcast will use the planet's own infrastructure against itself. By the time the authorities realize what's happening, the information will already be in the hands of billions of people. Jim stood silent for a long moment, considering the implications. This would change everything. There'd be no going back. There's already no going back, Zarakai replied. Operation Clean Slate ensures that. The only question is whether humanity learns the truth from us, or whether it dies in ignorance while governments fight shadow wars over alien technology. Marcus pulled up his own files on the computer system. I've been collecting evidence for years. Military contractors reverse engineering crashed vehicles, government facilities holding extraterrestrial prisoners, secret treaties with alien species. If we're doing this, we might as well do it right. Dr. Vasquez nodded enthusiastically. I have biological samples, tissue analysis, DNA sequences that prove beyond doubt that non-human intelligence has visited Earth. The scientific community has been silenced, but they haven't been eliminated. Over the next 3 days, Camp Liberty transformed into a war room. Every member of their expanded family contributed something to what they now called the Liberation Archive. Scientists provided research data, military personnel offered operational intelligence, and civilians shared witness, testimonies that painted a picture of decades of cover-ups and hidden contact. Zarakai worked 18-hour days, adapting Vorthic technology to interface with human systems, while teaching her companions to build and operate equipment they barely understood. The communication relay grew from a theoretical, designed to a working prototype that hummed with barely contained energy, but as they prepared for their revelation, Zarakai found herself grappling with unexpected emotions. The humans around her had become more than allies or even friends. They had become the family she had never had among her own people. You're worried about something, Jim observed, finding her working alone in the lab during what should have been her rest period. I'm worried about you, she admitted, not looking up from the quantum field generator she was calibrating. All of you. When this information is released, the world will change overnight. There will be panic, anger, demands for accountability. Governments will fall, and in the chaos that follows, we might not survive, Jim finished. Yes, we've considered that. Zarakai finally met his eyes. My people expected this exile to break me. Instead, you gave me something worth fighting for. I don't want to lose that. Jim smiled and placed a gentle hand on her scaled shoulder. Sarah, you've already saved us in more ways than you know. You've given us purpose beyond mere survival. You've shown us that the universe is bigger and more wonderful than we ever imagined. Whatever happens next, you've already won." And the next morning brought disturbing news. Marcus's intelligence contacts reported that Operation Clean Slate had been moved up. Government teams were already mobilizing, targeting facilities and individuals across the country. They had perhaps 48 hours before the sweep reached their area. "We launch tonight," Jim announced to the assembled team. "Ready or not, this is our chance." The final preparations took on a frantic urgency. The communication relay was moved to a concealed position on the mountain peak, where its broadcast range would be maximized. Backup power systems were installed, along with defensive measures to protect the equipment from both electronic and physical attack. The sun set behind the mountains. Zarakai stood before the assembled team for what might be their final briefing. These 17 humans had become her world, and she was about to ask them to risk everything for a cause that had begun as her personal exile. The pillar of light from the quantum relay painted the night sky in impossible colors as terabytes of suppressed information flooded Earth's communication networks. In living rooms across the globe, families watched in stunned silence as their television screens filled with classified documents, alien technology blueprints, and video testimonies from government officials who had kept humanity's greatest secret for decades. Zarakai monitored the global response from her position beside the relay, watching data streams cascade across her mobile display. The Liberation Archive was spreading faster than any virus, replicating itself across servers and devices before security systems could react to stop it. "My God!" Dr. Vasquez breathed through the communication link, her voice filled with awe. "The download metrics are off the charts. It's reached every major population center on Earth." In Washington, D.C., emergency meetings were being called, as government officials scrambled to contain a situation that was already beyond containment. In major cities around the world, crowds were gathering in public squares, staring at massive screens that displayed clear evidence of extraterrestrial contact dating back decades, but the response wasn't what anyone at Camp Liberty had expected. "Jim," Marcus called from the intelligence station, his voice tight with confusion. "I'm monitoring government communications, and something's wrong. They're not trying to shut down the broadcast. They're not even trying to deny it." Zarakai felt a chill that had nothing to do with the mountain air. "What do you mean?" "They're confirming it," Marcus replied, his words barely audible. "The president is being briefed for an emergency address. Military units are moving to secure positions, but not to suppress the information. They're preparing to validate it." Through the quantum relay sensors, Zarakai detected new energy signatures in Earth's upper atmosphere. Her enhanced vision could make out shapes that shouldn't exist, sleek vessels, moving with impossible grace through the darkness above. "We have company," she announced, her voice carrying a warning that made her human family tense with anticipation. The shapes descended slowly, their hulls reflecting starlight in patterns that spoke of technologies far beyond human capability. But these weren't Vorthak vessels. The design was wrong, the energy signatures unfamiliar. "These ships belong to someone else entirely." Tommy's voice crackled over the communication system, filled with excitement rather than fear. "Sarah, you need to see the news feeds. It's not just our information being broadcast anymore. Something else is transmitting." Zarakai activated her mobile display and accessed the global communication streams. What she saw made her hearts race with a mixture of hope and terror. The alien vessels were broadcasting their own message, and it was being received and translated by every device on Earth. The face that appeared on screens worldwide was hauntingly beautiful, delicate features marked by silver eyes that seemed to hold the wisdom of millennia. When she spoke, her words carried the authority of absolute truth. "People of Earth," the figure said, her voice somehow conveying warmth despite the vast distances involved. "I am Ambassador Lyrian of the Galactic Coalition. Your species has reached a critical threshold in its development, and the time for truth has arrived." Zarakai recognized the species, Ethereal, one of the founding members of the Coalition. They were diplomats and peacekeepers, arriving only when a world was ready to join the galactic community. But Earth wasn't ready. According to every metric her people used, humanity was still centuries away from being considered for contact. Your governments have known of our existence for many years. Ambassador Lyrian continued, her image crystal clear on billions of screens. They have worked with us to prepare for this moment, to ensure that first contact would occur under controlled circumstances. Tonight's revelation was not an accident, it was a test. The words hit Zarakai like a physical blow. A test? Everything they had fought for, everything they had risked, had been orchestrated by powers beyond their understanding? The individual responsible for tonight's broadcast is known to us, the ambassador said, and Zarakai felt the eyes of the universe focus on her. She is Zarakai of the Vorthek Empire, exiled to your world for refusing to participate in the systematic oppression of developing species. Her presence here was not punishment, it was opportunity. Down in the facility, Jim's voice cut through Zarakai's shock. Sarah, what is she talking about? What test? Before Zarakai could answer, the ambassador's image was replaced by something that made every human at Camp Liberty gasp in recognition. It was their own facility, viewed from orbit, with each of them clearly visible as they worked around the quantum relay. The test was simple, Ambassador Lyrian explained. Would humanity, when faced with one of their former enemies in exile, choose compassion over fear? Would they embrace difference over conformity? Would they fight for truth over comfortable lies? Images flashed across the screens, Zarakai's pod landing in the forest, Jim and his team's decision to help rather than turn her in, the months of cooperation and growing friendship, and finally the construction and activation of the quantum relay. The results have exceeded our most optimistic projections, the ambassador continued. Not only did you protect one who had been cast out, you embraced her as family. When faced with injustice, you chose to fight rather than submit. When offered the chance to liberate not just yourselves but your entire species, you accepted the risk without hesitation. Zarakai sank to her knees beside the quantum relay, the magnitude of what had been done to her finally becoming clear. Her court-martial, her exile, her supposed punishment, it had all been an elaborate manipulation, designed to test humanity's readiness for galactic citizenship. The Vorthik Empire, Ambassador Lyrian said, her voice carrying new weight, has been isolated from the galactic community for their aggressive policies and disregard for developing species' rights. Captain Zarakai's refusal to follow genocidal orders was reported to the coalition by agents within their own command structure. Her exile was arranged not as punishment but as sanctuary and as an opportunity to evaluate Earth's potential. The screen shifted again, showing the interior of what was clearly a coalition command ship. Figures of various alien species worked at stations that hummed with advanced technology, but their attention was focused on the data streaming from Earth's surface. Humanity has passed the test, Ambassador Lyrian announced. You have proven that your species possesses the moral courage necessary for membership in the galactic community. Tomorrow, coalition vessels will land at designated sites across your world. The age of isolation is ending. The age of partnership begins. As if summoned by her words, more vessels appeared in the night sky above Camp Liberty. These ships were different from the first arrivals, larger, more varied in design, representing species from across the galaxy. They descended like falling stars, their landing lights illuminating prepared sites that must have been chosen and prepared years in advance. Sarah? Jim called from the facility below, his voice filled with wonder and confusion. What do we do? Now? Zarakai stood slowly, her gaze fixed on the nearest landing site where a coalition vessel was settling onto the mountain plateau. The ship's hull bore markings she recognized, the symbols of the Galactic Health Service, the same organization she had served before her transfer to the Vorthek military. Now we go home, she said, her voice carrying both to her human family and to the coalition vessels above. All of us. The nearest ship's landing ramp extended, revealing figures silhouetted against warm golden light. But they weren't alone. Walking beside the coalition representatives were humans, scientists, diplomats, and military officers who should have been on Earth but clearly weren't. Dr. Vasquez's voice crackled with excitement over the communication system. The quantum signatures are incredible. The technology they're using makes our relay look like a stone hammer. But Zarakai wasn't focused on the technology. She was focused on the figure walking down the ramp, tall, elegant, with the silver eyes and serene bearing of an ethereal diplomat, but wearing the medical insignia she remembered from her youth. Dr. Shenville, she whispered. Recognizing her former mentor from the Galactic Health Service, the ethereal physician approached slowly, her movements carrying the careful respect due to someone who had endured great trials. Behind her, the human. Officials looked nervous but determined, clearly out of their depth but trying to maintain their composure. "Hello, Zarakai," Dr. Shenville said, her voice carrying harmonics that spoke of relief and pride. "It's time to come home." "This is my home," Zarakai replied, gesturing toward the facility where her human family was emerging to witness the impossible scene playing out before them. Dr. Shenville smiled, an expression that lit up her delicate features. "Yes, it is. And now we're going to make sure it stays that way." Jim approached slowly, his weathered face showing the strain of trying to process revelations that challenged everything he thought he knew about the world. "Doctor, with respect, I need to understand what just happened to my people." "Your people," Dr. Shenville replied, "have just become citizens of the galaxy. The isolation protocols that kept Earth quarantined have been lifted. Your governments have been working with coalition representatives for 3 decades too.